Mics are
check 1 2
mics
check,
are hot.
check.
1 2 3 1 2 3. I fell into
Check 1 2
a
check 1
burning
2
ring of fire.
Test.
Nice. Okay. Everybody feel good up here? We're kind of winging this. This is a soft forks in the future of Bitcoin panel. We've had this same type of conversation.
Don't tell them that. This is the first time we've ever talked about soft forks. All right, it's a new, exciting topic. All right, you guys definitely that paid good money to be here.
Do you want to host this?
No. You go.
Oh,
you go.
shoot. Okay. We're going to do a little bit of curveball on intros. Let's do name and what is a hobby outside of Bitcoin that you take part in? Something unrelated to Bitcoin, just to humanize you, not as like faceless devs, but as real people. Name, Casey.
My name is Casey Rodarmor, and recently I have gotten into dancing, specifically ecstatic dance, contact improv, West Coast swing, and Lindy hop, all of which I do very badly.
What is contact improv?
It's like a postmodern partner dance style where it's danced in connection with a partner, but with a fluid kind of lead follow.
And it's real San Francisco.
Yeah, no, it's German people do it too sometimes. And the point of contact can change. It's very good. I actually think it should be everybody's first partner dance.
Jeremy, you got any hobbies outside of dev?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Rubin, and I am an avid tennis player.
My name's Dan Held, and I'm an avid drone enthusiast. So I've been flying drones since 2015, and I was one of the first people to film some mountains in Colorado. So it's been a lot of fun. You get to see kind of a new perspective on things.
Hi, my name is Avihu. I used to say run, and then I was looking like in the picture over there. But after 3 girls, my main hobby is, well, taking care of 3 girls.
The most noble profession. So this is about softworks, and this conference is more kind of culture and artist focused. So even though we may have had this same type of conversation a bunch, I'm going to invite the 4 of you each to help me lay some groundwork here. Explain in your own words, keep it brief, what is a soft fork? I like to get 4 different dimensions of this. So what's a soft fork?
I'll take a stab at this as the least technical person on this panel. I'm surrounded by a bunch of developers here, and I'm a marketer. So I think of a soft fork as a backwards compatible upgrade to Bitcoin that doesn't break, I would say, really hard set consensus rules.
So Bitcoin is like the Bitcoin node that you have is like a Game Boy, and then a soft fork is like a new Game Boy, and then there's a question of like, well, do the new cartridges for the new Game Boy fit into the old Game Boy? And then there's a question of like, well, do the old cartridges fit into the new Game Boy? And a soft fork is a specific type of change where you're trying to preserve that the new cartridges, will go into the old Game Boy, but the old cartridges usually will go into the new Game Boy, but not all the time.
Yeah. I just like to think of that as a soft fork is something that you ask everyone else to run for the network that should improve the ability of the network to do something. That's how I have it in my mind.
Soft fork is an upgrade to Bitcoin, and there's like sort of weird, fiddly technical differences between a soft fork and a hard fork. But ultimately, these days, this is kind of the way that we change Bitcoin, add new rules, add new functionality. The Game Boy analogy is really good. I haven't heard that before.
Okay, we're going to start off with a trick question. How does a soft fork happen?
When a man loves a woman very much. Somebody proposes the new rules, says, okay, we want to add rule XYZ, we want a new transaction type. We want to have new locks or whatever. Somebody proposes it. Everybody discusses it to absolute death. And then consensus forms. And consensus is like, it's very, people sort of assume that there's some sort of governance process to Bitcoin, that there's going to be like a vote, and like some people are going to vote, and you're going to get 50% or 75% or whatever. It's not like that. It's anarchy. It's chaos. All right. Everybody everywhere just kind of gets consensus. And then eventually, enough people are willing to enforce these rules. And it's not really enough people because people don't matter. It's like how much like economic and social weight is willing to go behind this like new set of rules. And then you get to some, weird, threshold. And then everybody's enforcing the rules. Just sort of like that. It's very fuzzy. And actually, this fuzziness is really good. We don't want a vote. We don't want a parliament. We don't want a bicameral house. We don't want legislature. We don't want any of that shit. We want anarchy. Yeah.
I just hope it's not an extinct animal, that it's still going to happen again at some point.
There's a very useful guide by the Taproot Wizards. It's called Bipland. It's like a little children's book or a little children's illustration that shows you the process of how an update happens to Bitcoin. It's not very useful, and it's useful at the same time for those who've seen it.
I don't really know that I have that much to add, but I'd say it's also something that happens when it's not me proposing it. And
Poor
Not
Jeremy.
yet. Not yet.
yeah, I think it's always a messy process. I think it's very undefined, and anybody who's giving you this is what it is, this is how it works, there's a lot of maybe like ego in one of those definitions because most likely they're wrong. So it's a complicated thing.
So there's a bunch of soft forks. The popular ones are Cat. Jeremy, you endorse CTV and CheckSig from Stack. And again, I would make the generalization that most Bitcoiners, even the ones who spend full time thinking about it, myself included, struggle to fully grasp what these are and what they do. And so a lot of the technologists who specialize in these things work to try to come up with compelling reasons to the general public, like why you might want a soft fork. So I'll invite a couple of you, if you're on the board saying that you like a soft fork, how do you pitch that soft fork to an audience like this who is maybe more cultural or retail focused, maybe less technical? Like, why should they support a specific soft fork that you think should happen?
Yeah, I would say upgrades to Bitcoin allow it to do more things. And so OPCAT allows Bitcoin to have some of the expressiveness of the Ethereum network, for example. We could bring some of that back to Bitcoin, which allows for DeFi. That allows you to lend, borrow, stake your assets on Bitcoin. And that's, I think, an incredible new way to blossom the Bitcoin ecosystem.
I mean, talking about all the soft forks, or even a subset of them will probably take the next hour or so. The way I see it is that if we look just on covenants or potential covenant soft forks, there is probably a subset that is good enough to help with helping scaling solutions such as Lightning, Arc, helping protocols that suggest bridging such as BitVM, and then things that are completely different, like helping privacy, helping better UX on-chain. And then there is the level or the degree of which how much you are ready to take the richness of the new change. And it goes, I think, all the way on the scale from CTV, which is, as Jeremy likes to explain, probably the basic common ground of all of those, and all the way up to CAT, that is the, I would say, in my perspective, the richest of all. Then you have to go into the details.
I think just to throw a little, color on the stage, I'll put on a different hat and, say a soft fork is when these big-headed developers with their grandiose ideas think that they can modify my immutable money and make it do something that Satoshi Nakamoto, our financial savior, did not intend. And while I maybe don't personally believe anyone here has that intent to harm Bitcoin, I think a lot of people would say, well, soft fork is a dangerous moment for Bitcoin where the rules change in some appreciable way, and it's something that merits a lot of eyeballs to make sure that it's doing something in the interest and benefit of Bitcoin. For the line of different things being discussed, something like CTV is optimizing something that people are already kind of doing for the most part, which is pre-signed transactions. and that does enable some things that maybe weren't possible before. And then Kat, as Dan put it, is maybe reaching a little bit further across the aisle to say, can we get some of the more rich functionality we see in the Ethereum community? And that's why the Bitcoin community at large, might really have an opinion about it.
When you talk about it, I enjoy the spiciness you threw in there, Jeremy. I feel there's a lot of talking past each other, because one thing which I don't think anyone agrees on, there's various camps which don't begin by saying that they have this view on softworks, but softworks being a proactive thing or a reactive thing. I talk to a lot of people who say we should wait until there is a clear demonstrable demand for a particular softwork, and then we softwork that in. Or if Bitcoin is under duress or stress in some capacity, then we can ameliorate that with a softwork. Other people say we need to be proactive in seeking out ways to improve Bitcoin. I invite any of you to give some color on this.
I think I can actually give some color here. So I generally try to mostly stay out of soft fork discussions. I think maybe I've said a few times, I like CTV, let's do it. And then I think I'm on the list of people supporting CTV. But generally, I think my voice is not incredibly helpful because I'm not really a soft fork expert. I don't dive into it. They're very, very complicated. The merits of different soft forks is very, very complicated. A lot of the harms in particular are very, very theoretical. But in any case, I'm sort of a Bitcoin application developer. I want to develop on top of Bitcoin. And I'm simply not interested in spending my time developing things that are contingent on a future soft fork. So if there are people who say we need demand to demonstrate the importance or necessity of a soft fork, there's just a huge population of developers, myself included, who are simply not interested on what could I build with CTV? I don't even want to spend all that time for something that may never come to fruition or will come to fruition in 4 years. My attitude is okay, in 4 years when we get a soft fork or not, then I'll sit down and think really hard about it and think about what I can build. So I do think that we shouldn't add things to Bitcoin willy-nilly, but people who say that have to also acknowledge that, unless you're somehow funded or you're just a basement nerd who loves to experiment, there's a lot of sources of demand that simply will not show themselves before there's a very viable path or before a soft fork actually lands on chain. So that's sort of my answer to that question.
I think there's also a little bit of a con that happens where people will say, and it may not be the same person, so I'm not calling any particular person a con artist, but they'll say, show us the demand for this thing. If you really thought what you were going to do is valuable, wouldn't you see someone emulating it? And then they say, oh, well, we see people emulating it. So if it's emulated and people are able to do it today without needing a soft fork, why are you asking for a soft fork? And so then you just kind of end up in this loop going back and forth of what is demand? And I think that also ends up being, is when you do see real demand, what you're talking about is an emergency and a crisis. And I do actually think as developers and maintainers of the software, heading off a crisis is important. Because at the point where it's a crisis, now you have, let's say, we heard announcements today at the other event about the Bitcoin reserve. Now you have the president of the United States saying, hey, by the way, we're going to make you all do this upgrade right now because you did something that we need to do an emergency response to keep Bitcoin secure. And if we had done this 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been an emergency and we wouldn't have needed someone to strong arm the community. We would just already had a solution ready. So I think that's where there's a little bit of a trade-off. Real demand looks like an emergency.
I'm always more proactive than reactive. I think reactive is always putting you in a weird spot. And I think proactively, we can identify, we can look at other ecosystems like Solana and Ethereum and look at how DeFi blossomed over there and go, well, this is proof that demand exists. You can bring that back over to Bitcoin. And so being proactive about enabling that expressivity, I think is very critical because if we don't, then all of this DeFi activity happens on those chains. So we have seen evidence of demand on other chains. This used to be an old narrative in the Bitcoin space back in the 2015 era, was that will allow for all the experimentation to happen elsewhere. And then once it's safe and we've demonstrated value and demand, we'll bring it back to Bitcoin. And that's what this space is doing. That's what the ordinals are doing. Bitcoin DeFi is it's bringing that back to Bitcoin when we saw clear demand over on other ecosystems.
Yeah, on the proactivity, I would expand it to even say that it's not even just what's happening on Ethereum or on Solana, but even what's happening on Coinbase would likely, or even what's happening today on Bitcoin, could have potentially happened way better to more people in a more smooth way and better experience. So it's not just looking on other chains. Even if you really want to see what's the potential is, probably everything that is happening with Bitcoin.
There's an element to it which it's like, maybe we'll buy booze for our bar once we see if there's any patrons.
I've heard a lot of analogies in the past couple weeks, and that's one of the better ones. So, I asked this, again, a bit trick question at the top, which is like, how does a soft fork happen? And the answer is there's not like a good answer. But historically, we have seen our blessed, you might call, village elders come down from Mount Sinai, for another allegory, and deliver to us the path forward. And that's worked, again, qualifying language, pretty well so far, but we haven't seen a whole lot of those names. Again, maybe they're not as well known to the audience, but long-term Bitcoiners know them. Those in the devs community do. We've seen a couple of those people poke their heads back up lately. I invite spicy takes. Do we need new village elders? Does Bitcoin need, do Bitcoiners need to endorse new faces, fresh blood? Is that, would that be a good thing to see happen in the Bitcoin community? I kind of throw some curveballs here and I invite your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we used to see soft forks come from, Bitcoin Core, or people involved with Bitcoin Core. I think one thing that's happened is that as Bitcoin has reached more and more people, as there's more and more users, more and more people interested in it, a lot of the technical culture has kind of, aspects of it have become kind of toxic. These conversations have become kind of toxic. They're just really unpleasant to engage with, right or wrong. If you like a soft fork and you come out for it, or you don't like a soft fork and you come out against it, or you propose a soft fork, you're exposing yourself these days to a huge amount of politics, a huge amount of sort of strategic behavior, people not actually saying what they want, but taking some like one extreme position or another. And I totally understand why the Bitcoin Core developers just don't want to do that. If I don't want to participate in politics. Like, I do things unilaterally that people can adopt or not. And I'm just not interested in politics. And if I was a Bitcoin Core developer, I would not work on soft forks. I would work on other aspects of the code because I'm not interested in existing in this like toxic political space. And so I think that has happened to the Bitcoin Core developers. They for good, reasonable, personal reasons, they stay away from soft forks, weird-ass bullshit that's going to get some like Twitter idiots like mad, and they do sort of safer things there. They can just be sort of like chill open source developers. And I would like to see some of those people do more soft fork stuff, but I do understand that it's like a very unpleasant choice, like personally, to expose yourself to that kind of toxicity and to also put energy into something that you need to like get past like a bunch of fucking morons, basically. I mean, like, I won't name names like Luke Jr. or the Ocean People or Bitcoin Mechanic, grass-fed Bitcoin, but they're fucking idiots. They're fucking morons. They don't, like, the shit that comes out of their fucking mouths is fucking stupid. And like, I want some like, if I wanted some like reasonable soft fork, I'm just some reasonable guy, and then like some fucking sedevacantist anti-papist is like on my fucking ass and like just calling me a liar every 10 seconds. Like, I don't want to fucking deal with that. You know what I mean?
Do you recognize?
I don't know if I would put the word reasonable in. I hear this word a lot in the context of Bitcoin devs, and I'm not sure if I would put the word reasonable in every sentence that talks about people talking about soft forks.
we are all deranged. That's true. We've all gone mad by now.
Yeah, my worry is that I don't really think that, but I am my fear is that we've basically seen the last soft fork already, and that we are basically with every year that passes, we are losing this muscle, and it doesn't really matter at this point if the soft fork is about something like CTV that maybe everyone would agree, maybe even Luke would agree that it's potentially.
He has tweeted that he is in support of
Right,
CTV.
so I actually don't want to use names. That's
The other problem with Luke is that he has strong and dumb opinions about the activation method. So he'll turn any soft fork into like a political morass because he's like, no, you're not using my preferred soft fork method. Not to use names or anything, like Luke Jr.'s. I just
want to say that what I'm fearing of, without talking about any particular person, is that we're
Like
just
Luke Jr.
losing this muscle.
Or grass-fed Bitcoin mechanic.
Okay. Gotta let Avihu. Okay.
No, all good. That's all I wanted to say. That I would like at this point, I think this is important to understand that we are losing this ability. It's very clear going to treat Bitcoin later in the future.
I think part of it is to the extent that people feel like they have, that they are the village elder, or that people look to them maybe, to be the sheriff in some way. Yeah. If you're the sheriff of a town and there's, a crime going on, you can't just say, it's not really my job. If you do say that, you have to tell people, hey, by the way, I'm not enforcing the law anymore. So, if you want to do that, take it into your own hands. And I think we're in this moment where there's a group that maybe historically has done something, and there's just no real will for them to do that thing. It doesn't really mean that the thing shouldn't happen if they don't have the will to do it. And then also the well-meaning citizens of Bitcoin land also respect the order of historically this is how things have happened, and we're not trying to upset that order. I think that's why we're kind of in a weird moment where nobody's clearly abdicated their responsibilities.
I have kind of a weird specific question, and it's around looking historically at Taproot, where Taproot was designed and included a number of op success opcodes, which were, as I understand, explicitly reserved so that we could, sometime in the future, add opcodes there. And this is why all those soft fork proposals are opcode centric. Those of you who were more directly participating in the Taproot soft fork or aware of this, do you think that we're kind of dropping the ball by not really pushing that hard on any of these? That might be, again, a loaded question, but I think I was surprised to have learned this 2 years after Taproot happened. That we've kind of earmarked all this space, and we're not doing anything about it. If we are that seems kind of disappointing to me. I'm talking to you, Jeremy, but if any of you have other questions about it.
I think that an availability of space is not a mandate to use it. It's there. Honestly, I think that there's too much space. I think there are some things that maybe would have been strategic mistakes in the upgrading capacity of Taproot. Shout out to the annex. I think that that's sort of more close to the truth. If Bitcoin were finished today, and it's not the topic of this panel, but all right, let's double down on BitVM and other things, and we'll add the functionality that way. So, it's reasonable that we could just consider Bitcoin a finished, protocol layer and work with what we have. And those upgrade hooks, if we ever wanted something in the far-flung future, we now have a lot of flexibility with how we could do that. I could argument for that.
I want to wrap this up because Nick talked a really long time. Shout out, Nick. The second half of the title of this panel is The Future of Bitcoin. I invite each of you to share a white pill version of what you hope the future of Bitcoin looks like.
I'll jump in. So, Bitcoin isn't just the largest asset in crypto. It's larger than everything else combined. Unlocking DeFi on top of that will be the biggest opportunity ever to exist. So some of these opcode proposals, some of these upgrades are required to unlock that universe. I think it's well worth the game theoretic design trade-offs and technical and political capital that would be required to go make that happen. So, essentially we could see an entire, I think like I said before, one of the largest opportunities ever to exist in this space if we do these upgrades to Bitcoin.
I see, if I look like, 10 years to the future for Bitcoin, I see Bitcoin basically serves as like the base layer, and all the services that you get today for Bitcoin elsewhere, you just get them on one of the either meta protocols or layers on top of Bitcoin. And the meta protocols, you can choose whatever you want. The layers, you can choose and look on whatever you want. But the thing is that Bitcoin enables you to go back to the home or base layer in a trustless manner, and everything operates without hurting anything related to the scalability and censorship resistance of the core protocol.
One thing that I've kind of held as a North Star for a long time is that the day that you start running or using Bitcoin to be one of the best days of your life. So I think that that's something that we've still not really achieved for a lot of people throughout the world. And I think that that's something that, hopefully we can, select a set of upgrades and technologies that bring access to financial sovereignty and freedom to more people.
Bitcoin absolutely crushes fiat money, and nation states have less ability to inflict financial violence on everybody, leading us to a great golden age of capitalist flourishing.
There you have it. Separate money from state, baby. Let's go. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.